Scott Waterman, the
second time to when the railroad was king.
The B&M had the Rutland coming in here. It was a main line from Boston to Montreal. It was a booming railroad town.
Train enthusiasts tell the history of northern railroads and share stories of the good old days. Then step into the 50s with our newest special, Vermont Memories 2.
The 50s were absolutely
full of chrome.
Everybody had saved their money.
Everybody had to have one.
They wanted.
Huge engines.
Because it was the era of affluence.
Big cars, cruising, weekend sports, an old pastime becomes a booming business, and much, much more. Call now with your pledge of $120, and you'll be able to enjoy the memories of Vermont with friends and family for years to come.
That's an absolutely marvelous addition to your video library. This is the last chance that you have to receive that this evening, so we hope that you'll take advantage of it. If you're not yet a member of Vermont ETV and you'd like to include that nostalgia collection in your video library, this is the only place that you can receive that. You know, these programs, Vermont Memories 1, 2, and Northern Railroads were produced right here on Vermont ETV, or at Vermont ETV. So if you were interested in that, call right now and make that pledge of $120. Help us get to that $8,000 mark. We are making progress. We're at $1,505 right now. But if you're not yet a member, call the number you see on your screen. It's toll-free thanks to Frontier Communications. 1-800-639-8303.
I have to tell you, Lou just took a phone call from Woodstock for $300. Let's hear some cowbells for that one. And Rose just took a call from Bristol for $120. That is just wonderful. Things are really moving here at Vermont ETV this evening. We're at 1505 with an overall goal this evening of $8,000. We're well on our way to that goal, and only you can make it happen. I was just looking at this Barn Again guide, which is a resource guide for Barn Again. And what's really interesting is that if you have a barn or a structure and you're thinking about restoring it, it gives you helpful tips on the foundations and framing and the roofs and the siding and the painting and the windows and the doors. So it's really, really a nice guide to have. And at the $60 pledge level tonight, we will give you this absolutely free. So show your support to Vermont ETV, show your support for public television, and we'll get this in the mail to you at the $60 pledge. Our toll-free number is 1-800-639-8303.
And here's another reason for you to call with your pledge. Everyone who calls during this program will be eligible for a trip to the French Riviera. This is an integrated linguistic and cultural one-week stay during September. There you will improve your command of the French language while discovering the cultural richness of the area. Call with your pledge now. You could be sunbathing on the Riviera or visiting famous museums or enjoying a gastronomic experience if you're the lucky winner. Special thanks to Friendly French Immersion in Montreal. Call now.
Stay with us because coming up next is the 7 Spiritual Laws of Success by Deepak Chopra. And right now, you have the opportunity to go to the phone and make that pledge of support for this type of programming that we have here on Vermont ETV. We'd like to remind you, if you call in at the $90 level, we will say thank you by sending you the Barn Again video, the program that you have just enjoyed. This is your last chance this evening to receive the thank you gifts that we're offering right now. For your $60 pledge, we'll say thank you by sending you the Barn Resource Guide that goes along with the program that you've just enjoyed. And of course, for $120, our very special nostalgia collection, Vermont Memories 1, 2, and Northern Railroads, our own Vermont ETV Productions. But do call right now and make that pledge of support because membership dollars are very, very important to us here. They make many programs possible for your enjoyment. Let's take a look at another one right now.
Les Miserables, the musical phenomenon that took Broadway and the world by storm, celebrates its 10th anniversary with a concert performance that brings together cast members who help make it a must-see around the globe. See why the world loves Les Mis.
You're watching
watching viewer-supported Vermont Public Television, where you belong.
What's reading?
What's she saying? Also know what you're reading. It's Yates. Keep your head back. Won't you talk a little, Yates, to her? Show her what a treat that is. When the hell are they gonna get to her?
Clint Eastwood directs and stars in $1 Million Baby, but it's the people that he directed with whom I wanted to talk. That's Morgan Freeman and Hilary Swank. Hilary, in fact, won the Best Actress Critics' Choice Award from the Broadcast Film Critics Association, and I wanted to talk to them about the importance of subtext.
It's wonderful to see yourself again.
It is always good to see you.
What an interesting punam.
Interesting what?
Punam. Someone is going to explain it to you.
That's what I was afraid of.
And you're going to laugh.
I hope so. To what extent do you and Clint talk out what we don't get to hear and see on screen?
We don't talk about it. It's there because it's there. If you read a script and the characters grabbed you, it's grabbed you because you've read the subtext.
I asked Morgan to what extent he and Clint talked about the subtext. He said we don't.
True. It's true. Clint is a firm believer in not thinking too much. He says, I get the people that I think are right for the roles, and I know that they're going to do their homework. When they come to the set, they know their characters, and then what happens is he believes in you, and that belief makes you believe in yourself, and he says, trust your instinct, and that's why he only does it in 1 or 2 takes, because he says anything after that you're thinking.
You've worked with a lot of good people.
I really have. I really have, and I detract from none of them.
So what special things does he bring that you particularly appreciate?
Well, I think maybe, you know, and I've been talking about this and talking about this and talking about this and talking about this, and I have not ever said the one thing that might be germane. I have a personal response to Clint Eastwood that do I dare say love him?
Yes, you may dare say love him. Let's accept that you like him as director.
Love.
That's the very term that Morgan just used.
Yeah. If I could do every movie for the rest of my career with Clint Eastwood, I would be one happy girl. He believes actors know when they're working on all 8 cylinders.
Wonderful job.
Thank you.
Hilary, it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
I'm Patrick Stone.
If you want to get to the title, maybe he's not the one to take you there.
Flicks with Patrick Stoner explores the craft and pleasure of filmmaking and its impact on our community for public television stations around the country.
Welcome to the future. PBS Digital. This is the site of the largest mass murder in the history of the world. Auschwitz. 1 million people died.
Date is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Peter and Helen Bing, the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations, the Wasserman Foundation, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Linda Ellerby. The program you have seen is the first of a 6-part series which examines Auschwitz as a model of the goals and the operation of the Nazi state. Following each program, we're going to have a short conversation with leading writers and scholars to help us approach some of the complexities these terrible events present. Joining me is Melvin Jules Bouquet and Michael Berenbaum. Melvin Jules Bouquet is a member of what has come to be called the second generation, the children of the survivors. Mr. Bouquet is an author and professor of creative writing at Sarah Lawrence College. Dr. Michael Berenbaum has dedicated much of his life to increasing public awareness of the Holocaust. Dr. Berenbaum oversaw the creation of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. I was born in 1944. I never heard of the Holocaust in school. I never heard of the Holocaust till I was, I think, 15, 16 years old, and read the book Exodus.
Well,
and that was my introduction.
The 50s were the quiet years in many ways. American Jews did not particularly want to confront it. European Jews were busy creating lives for themselves. They had no interest in broadcasting it to the world, at least partially because they believed that the world had no interest in hearing from them, and they were right. To what does one attribute the virtual explosion in Holocaust interest? You can track the moments over the decades. The Eichmann trial in the early 60s, the silly television show Holocaust in the 70s, the Holocaust Museum and Schindler's List in the 80s. This stuff recurs.
In the 90s.
Schindler's List was 90s? Oh, no, oh right, no, it's the 90s, sorry. The Holocaust Museum and Schindler's List in the 90s, right, precisely.
So why another documentary about the Holocaust?
We're now 60 years from the event. This is really appearing at the 60th anniversary of the liberation, or of the end of Auschwitz. The youngest of the survivors are in their late 70s and early 80s. And this is the last moment that we can hear from those who were there. And this is the moment that we have a distance from the event and can look back in a different way.
How can presentations of the Holocaust be made without doing an injustice to history?
When the television show Holocaust came out, when was it, 20-some years ago? Yeah. The 70s, maybe pushing 30 years ago. A friend of my father's who knew him very well, but was not from Europe, turned to him and said, "Joe, I didn't know it was so bad." Well, my father was not a shrinking violet. He talked about this stuff just about every day of his life. If it took network television to inform someone of the most informative events in his history, then clearly something was wrong. The media does have a strange and undeniable power. The line I would basically draw is, if you leave it and you're feeling good, then the thing is bad.
There's a joke in Germany that they told about it. His docudrama, The Holocaust, had more impact than the original.
Do you see signs of Holocaust fatigue?
And there are good reasons to be tired of the Holocaust. And one of the reasons to be tired about the Holocaust is because it's so overwhelmingly negative. It is so bleak, it is so horrible. It's a heavy burden. It's a heavy burden for civilization. It shatters your sense of belief in God, your sense of belief in humanity, your sense of belief in the goodness of governments, in the altruism of human beings.
So we learn from it?
I think we learn nothing from it. Michael, you used the word learn, and that's one of the many problems with the Holocaust. It is simultaneously endlessly fascinating because it does embody the extremes of human behavior, but it is also endlessly exhausting because it provides no reward whatsoever. There is a tendency, however, on behalf of many people to try and impute some lesson to it. I find that incredibly dangerous. The second you find a lesson, you are moving 1 inch towards finding a silver lining, towards actually justifying it. And that seems as repugnant as the experience itself. It has nothing to teach us. It's that terrible.
It may have nothing to teach us, and it may have everything to teach us at the very same time.
It has nothing to teach us, and yet we have to recognize it.
Yet we have to recognize it. We have to face it.
You grew up the child of a survivor. What does it mean to be second generation?
Everybody I knew had come from Europe. That was the society surrounding us. There were no grandparents. Everybody's parents had numbers on their arms. It was simply the conditions of life. It wasn't until I got to elementary school that I realized that anyone's family had a past.
The most important event in your life
occurred before I was born.
And you have memory of memory instead of memory.
How is the final solution, the quote, final solution, changed history?
Changed history because we discovered a world in which there are no limits. And that is that there were no ethical restraints, no religious constraints, no moral constraints, no checks and balances, no decency that restrained outrage And we now know that human beings are capable of doing everything to each other. So we live in a world in which the unimaginable has happened, and that means that we can anticipate that people are capable of acting without limits.
That therefore will?
That it's possible that they will. And the other thing we have is we have a world in which, after this Herculean effort has been made to transmit the memory of the Holocaust and to scream never again, we've sat idly by as other genocides have taken place and are taking place.
Even as we speak.
Even as we speak.
And yet both of you have devoted most of your life to struggling with this subject. What motivates you?
It's simply that one can't escape from it. The more you wrestle with it, the more wrestling there is. It's the very lack of satisfactions that actually keeps one going on.
From where you sit, what would you say to young people?
Try not to be a perpetrator. Try not to be a bystander. And try not to be a victim.
Thank you both very much. I'm Linda Ellerby.
Explore the inner workings of Auschwitz-Birkenau through interactive maps, Nazi documents, and personal accounts. Visit Auschwitz on pbs.org. Stay tuned for more Auschwitz inside the Nazi state.
This PBS show will return in a moment. Next time on POV, what does it take to get elected president?
A new hat, rather a bonnet, was tossed into the Democratic presidential race today.
In 1972, Shirley Chisholm found out.
If you can't support me, or you can't endorse me, get out of my way. You do your thing, and let me do mine.
Where the personal meets the political. It's Chisholm 72, only on POV.
The epic of the Castro era is probably one of the greatest stories of the last 100 years.
If you were to be politically effective, at some point you needed to be ready to wield a gun.
He's viewed as a savior, the James Dean of international politics.
This is a man who doesn't have a sense of feeling.
There's a limit to what the United States and self-respect can endure.
Fidel was basically telling Khrushchev that if Cuba might be sacrificed, that's okay.
Khrushchev's reaction to this was, it sounds like he's telling me to blow up the world.
He has defied the United States and survived.
They were mothers, fathers, soldiers, statesmen. They were writers, rebels, leaders, crusaders. They were American heroes. They were American slaves. This is their story. Slavery and the making of America.
We now continue with Auschwitz, inside the Nazi state. The Nazi state is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Peter and Helen Bing, the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations, the Wasserman Foundation, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome back to our continuing dialogue on Auschwitz and the Nazi state. With me are two distinguished scholars to discuss the origins of genocide. Claudia Kuntz is professor of history at Duke University, Edward Kesey is Assistant Professor of African Studies at the University of South Florida. Is the Holocaust, genocide in general, is this a product of the 20th century?
To say that the Holocaust or genocide is a product of the 20th century is to suppose that before the 20th century there was no genocide. But history tells us that, in fact, as far back in time as we can go, human beings have engaged in this systematic and deliberate effort of eliminating groups of people.
Germany before Hitler was not a small nation. It was also one of the most cultured, educated, and creative societies in history. How was it so easily transformed?
Civilized and modern states have the capacity to produce fine things, but they also have the capacity to destroy. And Germany, under the Third Reich or under Hitler, typified that very, very important irony.
It's so hard for me to believe. I need to know more about the process by which the Nazis transformed the Jews into the enemy.
By 1939, when the war began, they had been taught by school books, by textbooks, that the people who stood in the way of German progress were a threat. And that didn't only mean Jews. It meant Polish people who got in the way. It meant handicapped people, disabled people, anybody who was so-called undesirable.
Gypsies, homosexuals.
Exactly. These people visually looked like the material in their textbook that said Jews are different, they're alien. And that, I think, facilitated killing with a clear conscience.
Is it a good idea for kids today to question their education?
A good education teaches kids to question their education, to look at the occasions in American history when our government, convinced it was right, virtually exterminated American Indians, enslaved millions of Africans coming to this country against their will, to be alert to the many forms that genocide can take.
How do you define a victim in genocide?
In many cases, many instances of genocide, victims are dehumanized before perpetrators can proceed to destroy that group without remorse.
In other words, we can't see them as I see you and you see me.
Absolutely.
We have to stop seeing them as other humans.
First, they are constructed as animals. For instance, in Nazi Germany, for instance, the Jews were presented to the German public as vermin or lice. In Cambodia, Pol Pot used to describe Western educated intellectuals as microbes. In Rwanda, the Tutsi victims of the genocide that were perpetrated against them by the Hutus were constructed as cockroaches and snakes.
What are the elements in society, in any society, that can prevent genocide?
I am tempted to give you three important examples of things that ought to exist in a society for genocide to be prevented. Religious morality. But Rwanda was a religious society. It was 90% Catholic. Yet this is a society that within 100 days eliminated between 800,000 and 1 million people. I could say democracy could probably be one of the elements that ought to exist in the society for genocide to be prevented. But Rwanda was a democratic society. If only individuals can feel that they all belong to a group and collectively they help to develop progress, promote progress and prosperity in that group, then that sense of obligation that is dependent on our sense of affection for an individual will serve us well. So that together,
you need me.
Absolutely.
We need a force capable of intervening early to stop genocide, to send the signal to the leaders, you cannot do this with impunity. You will pay.
Genocide is occurring right now in the Sudan, and yet we don't have a Sudanese representative on this panel in this show. Why not?
It would be too dangerous for a Sudanese representative to criticize his or her government in public in this situation.
It is a very hard story for the media to tell when people out of fear cannot tell their stories.
When we asked, what would you like us to say, they answered, this is a human catastrophe. The message I was asked not only to encourage and facilitate intervention from outside, but also to get urgently needed food and medical care to displaced people within Sudan.
What happened in Rwanda, Somalia, Nazi Germany, the Holocaust, could it happen here?
To the extent that genocide is a product of human behavior, and that genocide occurs under trying conditions and circumstances, then any society, anywhere, democratic and totalitarian, can be vulnerable to genocide.
You know, I don't hear either one of you saying that the answer to the prevention of genocide is to teach people to stress the sanctity of human life.
Well, that's the bottom line. To sanction human life, not only to value highly human life that appears to be like us, but all human life, to respect difference.
Cuba. Beyond the culture, the cigars, and the classic cars, lies a world often overlooked, with jumping crocodiles, marching crabs, and tiny hummingbirds. Cuba, wild island of the Caribbean. Next time on Nature.
The wolf ran ahead and disappeared into the forest. Riding Hood was so busy.
In News in the Woods, there were confirmed reports. The wolf sprinted directly to grandmother's house.
A solid oak entry door with steel hardware and a deadbolt lock could have kept the wolf out of her house.
But the wolf got in, and there he found Grandma resting on an antique wrought iron bed worth between $6,000 and $8,000.
Did somebody say wolf? Wolfgang Amadeus?
In my interview with the wolf, he said he prefers to do his own stunts to convey more realism to the story.